Tonight, the death toll mounting on both sides as Russia's war on Ukraine stretches into its fourth week. New video showing the hundreds of civilians sheltering in a theater before Russian bombs destroyed it. Banners outside that building reading "Children" in Russian, not enough to deter the airstrike. An American civilian among those killed in another blast. Firefighters rushing to save others trapped in blazing fires. An estimated 7,000 Russian troops dying too. Tonight, our Richard Engel goes inside a Kyiv hospital. The heartbreaking story there of one woman who's lost everything. Detention expanded. Brittney Griner expected to remain in Russian custody until mid-May. The WNBA star was arrested and detained on drug charges last month. New video showing Griner leaving a courtroom in Moscow. But American officials say they still haven't been able to see her for themselves. COVID cases rise, the troubling uptick driven by the new Omicron subvariant. Experts warning it is up to 30 times more transmissible than past strains. China and parts of Europe already dealing with skyrocketing cases. Could another wave be headed to the U.S.? Desperate search. An 18-year-old woman abducted in a Walmart parking lot. A surveillance image shows the suspect connected to her disappearance. The missing woman not seen for 5 days. Her family speaking out tonight, their plea to the public. The high-end robbery caught on camera. Nearly $100,000 of designer handbags stolen in just 24 seconds. The suspects then leading police on a high-speed car chase. 4 people arrested, a 5th person still on the run. And an in-depth look at ghost guns, the untraceable weapons that are built from a kit that can be purchased without a background check. Our Von Hilliard takes you inside a gun show to find out just how easy it is to buy them. Top story starts right now. Good evening. I'm Kate Snow in for Tom Llamas. Tonight we begin with the devastating scenes in Ukraine. Civilian targets again crushed by the Russian assault. New video posted by the Ukrainian military showing hundreds of civilians huddled in Mariupol in a theater before Russian bombs destroyed their shelter. Rescuers still searching through the rubble, hoping to find survivors. Thousands now desperately trying to flee that city. The roads leading out lined with bumper-to-bumper traffic. Residents there have been living without electricity or running water for weeks now. An estimated 200,000 people still need to be evacuated. In Kyiv, meantime, a massive fire blazing at a warehouse on the outskirts of that city. First responders rushing to put out the flames. The capital bombarded day after day by Russian missiles. Ukrainian President Zelensky visiting a family at a hospital there, bringing flowers to their bedsides, attempting to keep spirits high as he pleads with the world for more support. It's the civilians staying behind in Ukraine bearing the brunt of the Russian assault, with seemingly no targets off limits. NBC's Richard Engel leads us off from Kyiv tonight.
With Russia's military advance stalled, its troops in disarray, and thousands of them killed, according to estimates by U.S. officials, Russian forces are now going after civilians, knowingly. In Mariupol, Ukraine's military posting this video of hundreds of people who'd been taking shelter in the basement of a theater. In front and in back were banners in Russian reading "Children," big enough to be visible from the sky. Yesterday, Russia bombed it anyway. But tonight, officials say the shelter remained intact. In Chernihiv, Russia struck an apartment building. Among the casualties was an American citizen. No indication the building was targeted. And in Kyiv, firefighters scrambled to rescue survivors after yet another, apparently indiscriminate attack. British intelligence reports Russia is using older, less precise weapons and is resorting to older, cruder tactics, including trying to starve out Kyiv.
Russia has clearly resorted to siege warfare. This was one of the biggest food storage facilities in the entire country. 50,000 tons of food were here, all burned. And it's impossible that this was an accident because it was bombed twice. And then another food storage facility just about a mile from here was also attacked. Do you have a message?
In a hospital bed nearby, Volodymyr was injured while trying to salvage food from the burned-out warehouses. I want this war to be over so I can see my family, he said. Down the hall is Katerina, who sold milk and yogurt at an open market. She was in a basement and went outside for a moment to wash a blanket when a Russian shell exploded. It tore off her leg, and shrapnel went through her back and into a lung. Before, I had a house and a job. Now I'm disabled and have no home. And why? For what? She asked, and began to curse Russia. President Zelensky visited another hospital in Kyiv, meeting the family we met last week. All of them shot in their car at close range by Russian troops as they were trying to escape. Zelensky also addressed Germany's parliament and asked for help to stop Russia from erecting a new Berlin Wall, separating the free world from tyranny and repression.
Kate, the mood here in Kyiv is starting to change. People not only believe that they can win this war, but that they are starting to win it. But the big question people ask is, how will Vladimir Putin react now that he has his back against the wall? Kate?
All right, Richard, thank you again for being there. Next, some of the first people to make it out of the beleaguered city of Mariupol, where at least 80% of the buildings have been destroyed. Now reaching western Ukraine, these folks. Molly Hunter spoke with some of them as they shared their stories of struggle and survival.
For 16 days, the Russians have besieged, starved out the city of Mariupol. From above, it's unrecognizable. 80 to 90% of the buildings destroyed, according to city officials. 350,000 residents trapped inside. On the southeast corner of the country, on the Black Sea, the strategic port is on the Russian land route to Crimea. Now, survivors, Mariupol residents 17-year-old Yulia and her mother, also Yulia, are part of the first group of civilians to make it out alive.
When you know that any moment you can be killed, and you can choose to be killed moving from this town or to be killed sitting in a room.
They had no heat, no electricity, no water.
We together cooked borscht, and I was scared.
The windows and doors on their apartment blew out on March 4th.
The bombs were falling, and they were falling from the airplanes.
Their home completely destroyed on March 12th. At age 17, Yulia can distinguish the different sounds of Russian aerial attacks.
You can hear the mines when they're falling and when they're close, because it's like this sound.
In the last few days, the city council says 30,000 people have escaped the city, but not on humanitarian corridors. Convoys of private cars, 6,500 in recent days, leaving from what was thought to be a safe meeting point, the now destroyed drama theater.
Driving together is safer. Like if someone hits one car, and another would help, and like with everything, like together it's safer.
And as terrifying as that was for them, Kate, that was the safer option. Now, Yulia describes racing out of Mariupol, going through more than a dozen Russian checkpoints. And she says Russian soldiers actually took their phones, deleting messaging apps and all the photos that she and her family had taken of the destruction in her hometown. Kate?
Oh, wow. Molly, thank you. The UN now saying the number of Ukrainian refugees has passed a staggering 3.2 million, some of them finding shelter in churches, hoping their prayers are heard. Gabe Gutierrez is in Lviv tonight.
Tonight in Ukraine, faith is being tested. At Lviv's Christ Fellowship Church, Reverend Igor Ivanishan has opened his doors to refugees.
It seems surreal, like movie, except you see real people suffering. They hug me and they cry and they cannot believe bombs are not falling on them.
Bogdan Priyanko lost touch with his wife and 4 children days ago after shelling damaged the home where they'd been staying without him near Kyiv. I began to pray to God, he says. I asked God to save them. Please take my life, but I want them to be saved. He says he couldn't meet up with his family because of Russian checkpoints.
You don't know where your family is?
Yeah,
right now?
I know that they're not in Ukraine, but don't know where.
Outside the church, Victoria Ladmarova can't let go of Emma and Lila. Why aren't they closing the skies, she says. The Russians are destroying everything. Another refugee tells us he saw his friend shot by Russian troops. We've blurred the picture he showed us. It's enough to test anyone's faith. But in this war, some prayers are answered. After we first spoke, today Bogdan finally got a hold of his wife and kids. They're somewhere in Poland, en route to Germany.
I said to God, you know, God give my life, but save life of my children and help them, you know, and He helped. I'm really, really happy.
Well, Gabe, at least that's a little bit of good news for that family. I know you've also heard from UN officials giving an update on just how quickly the number of refugees is rising in Ukraine. Is it faster than they expected even?
Yes, Kate. The UN official says that the numbers are rising exponentially. In just a matter of weeks, Poland has become one of the largest refugee hosting countries in the world. That country alone has seen nearly 2 million refugees already. Other countries such as Romania and Moldova are also seeing a huge spike, and the UN says that more than 90% of these refugees are women and children, Kate.
Okay, Gabe, thank you. And we'll see you back in our next half hour as well. Back here in the United States, we're learning more about the White House's commitment to hundreds of millions in new security aid for Ukraine as President Biden doubles down on his harsh criticism of President Putin amid concern that Russia could turn to China for help now. Let's bring in NBC News Chief White House correspondent Kristen Welker to tell us more. So, Kristen, what did President Biden say today on Putin specifically?
Well, Kate, President Biden called Vladimir Putin a, quote, murderous dictator. And tomorrow he's going to have what's expected to be a really tough phone call with Chinese President Xi. Just today, the Secretary of State saying the administration is concerned China, a key Russian partner, is considering directly assisting Russia with military equipment. And earlier this week, you may remember the National Security Advisor warned his Chinese counterpart there would be serious consequences if China stepped in to help Russia. Now, remember, China has not condemned the invasion, and just like much of Europe, they continue to buy Russian oil and gas. Meanwhile, an administration official tells us that new U.S. military aid to Ukraine will be sent out as fast as possible, Kate.
Well, and let's talk more about that. So what are we learning about the weapons that the U.S. may be sending, and how quickly might they arrive?
Well, that is the key question, and we are learning more about the weapons, including 100 drones. This is really the first time that the U.S. is going to send out armed drones to Ukraine, so this is going to be significant. They're known as switchblades, and they act as remote-guided explosives. Also included 800 Stingers, which are portable missiles that can shoot a plane out of the sky. They rest on someone's shoulders, and we also will include thousands of smaller weapons, rifles, machine guns, and shotguns. Now, some Republicans have been arguing the administration is not acting quickly enough, but again, the administration is pushing back, saying that they plan to move quickly. They stress they're coordinating with allies and partners to transfer those weapons in a safe and secure way, which, of course, Kate, is challenging, given that it is a war zone. Kate.
All right, Kristen Welker at the White House for us. Kristen, thank you. As we enter this fourth week of the war in Ukraine, we want to bring in retired four-star General Barry McCaffrey. He's an NBC News military analyst. General, nice to see you. Wish it were for different reasons. A senior U.S. defense official today said that Russia has launched more than 1,000 missiles to date. Not all of them have been successful, but we have obviously seen devastating strikes on civilians. We just saw Richard Engel's report, that theater in Mariupol to begin with. What does that tell you about their campaign right now?
Well, they're in the third failing stage of an attempt to take down Ukraine. They started with an attempt using Spetsnaz and GRU agents and airborne assault forces to grab the country in a couple of days, and it failed miserably. Then they started the mass armor air, land, sea forces to destroy Ukrainian armed forces. That has now failed. What they're now doing is an orchestrated, deliberate terror campaign to slaughter civilians and to cause the capitulation of the Ukrainian government. And I doubt it's going to work. The Russians are in trouble. Putin has led them into a diplomatic, economic, and military disaster. He's thrashing around now, trying to get help from the Chinese, from the Syrians. I'll bet he has to call up the reserves pretty soon. This is 60% of the Russian army is ground into a halt inside Ukraine. Disgraceful, horrific situation.
Slovakia announced that it's willing to send missile defense systems to Ukraine if NATO is willing to backfill them. It's kind of like circumventing, trying to do the same thing that we almost did with Poland, right, with the U.S. sending fighter jets and transferring them through Poland. Would that missile defense system make a big difference? Can you explain for those of us who don't know the technology?
Well, the S-300 anti-air defense can strike both ballistic and cruise missiles. It would be a significant contribution to controlling the airspace. There are 3 NATO nations that have the S-300, the Russian-designed, Soviet-designed anti-aircraft system. Getting it into Ukraine, into the hands of fighters, training them, making sure they have the maintenance capability is a big ask. I think the more likely outcome that will assist the Ukrainians is getting in more unmanned aerial lethal drones, as well as this, Christian Welker talked about the Stinger missile, 2,500 miles an hour up to 11,000 feet, and the Javelin, another sure shot kill anti-tank weapon. All these things you can train a civilian to operate in an hour. That's going to be the real support for the Ukrainian fighters.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you about that list of weapons that Kristen went through and this new aid. Is it enough? Is it enough to tip the scales?
Well, I think the biggest thing we've learned is the surprising courage and leadership, both political and military, of Ukrainian forces. It's inspirational watching what they've done to protect their cities, to protect their country. We're also been surprised by the monumental incompetence at a general officer level, as well as at a battalion fighting level of the Russians. So I think the smart munitions we're sending in there, along with humanitarian aid, you talked about that basically 5 million Ukrainians internally displaced are now fleeing into Western Europe. That's been our support, and maybe it'll work. I like the fact that President Biden called Putin a war criminal. I think we need to isolate him. We need to tell Russia these sanctions are on there for the rest of time until Putin's gone. So we're at a very fragile point for Ukraine. They're suffering horrible, but they're fighting bravely.
General Barry McCaffrey, always great to have you. Thank you so much.
Good to be with you today.
Let's turn to new developments now in the story of that American WNBA player, Brittney Griner. She's been detained in Russia for weeks on drug charges. Today, a Russian court ruled that she will stay in jail for several more weeks awaiting trial. NBC's Priscilla Thompson has that story.
Tonight, new video on social media appearing to show WNBA center Brittney Griner leaving a Moscow courtroom amid reports from Russian state media that the basketball star's detention in Russia has been extended through mid-May. The video, first seen circulating today, coincides with state news agency TASS reporting that, quote, the court extended the term of detention of U.S. citizen until May 19, citing the Khimki court of the Moscow region. A member of the Public Monitoring Commission told TASS that Griner is sharing a cell with 2 inmates with no prior convictions who are also being held on drug charges. They've helped Griner order books, TASS was told, and that one problem for the basketball star is the size of the beds, given her around 6'7" stature. But the U.S. State Department says American officials haven't been allowed to see Griner themselves.
We're deeply concerned about this case, in part because we have not yet been granted consular access.
Griner's agent did not respond to NBC's request for comment, but has previously said that they're in touch with her lawyer in Russia and that her mental and physical health remain our primary concern. The 2-time Olympic gold medalist was arrested by Russian customs officials on drug charges in February and has been detained in the country for weeks. Russian customs officials released video earlier this month that they say shows Griner going through customs at an airport near Moscow. The Customs Service says they found vape cartridges with hash oil, a crime punishable by up to 10 years in prison. Over the weekend, basketball players and civil rights leaders in California rallying for Griner's immediate release.
I think we all should be very concerned about Brittney Griner's safety and all the hostages who are being held in Russia.
Demands for action growing across the country. Americans hoping for her safe and swift return. Priscilla Thompson, NBC News, New York.
Back here at home to new details on that fiery crash in West Texas that killed at least 9 people, including members of a college golf team. Federal officials announcing a 13-year-old was behind the wheel of the pickup truck that struck the team van head-on. Morgan Chesky reports.
Tonight, stunning new details in the fiery collision killing 9, including 7 members of a college golf team. Federal investigators revealing the driver of the pickup truck that struck the team van wasn't old enough to legally drive.
A 13-year-old child was behind the wheel of the pickup truck.
Federal agents with the NTSB say the 13-year-old was driving with a 38-year-old man in the passenger seat. Both died at the scene. Investigators say new evidence suggests what could have caused the pickup to veer suddenly into the other lane.
A front tire, which was a spare tire, had failed, which resulted in the vehicle pulling hard to the left and crossing into the opposing lane.
The parents of 22-year-old Jackson Zinn, who died at the scene, say they're shocked.
It's still tragic, but
Yeah.
I don't
We weren't gonna.
I don't want to get hung up on the details. I want to celebrate my son's life.
The University of the Southwest sharing their heartbreak.
Our institution is crushed and broken, but strong.
But tonight, a glimmer of hope. After being airlifted from a fiery, mangled scene, Dayton Price and Hayden Underhill, the only survivors on board the team van, are improving in a Lubbock, Texas hospital.
And tonight, authorities stress that having a 13-year-old behind the wheel is a very clear violation of the law. They say that this investigation is very active and ongoing, as many questions remain. Kate?
Absolutely, Morgan. Thank you. Turning now to COVID, there's growing concern that another potential COVID wave, I hate to say it, could be on the horizon, even as numbers continue to fall. A new Omicron subvariant driving up cases in Europe, and it comes, of course, just as a lot of Americans are letting their guard down. NBC's Miguel Almaguer has the latest.
The record rise in new COVID cases overseas is tonight spawning renewed concern around the globe. Omicron subvariant BA.2 appears to be fueling new infections in the Western Pacific, African, and European regions. But the WHO says the 11 million new cases are just the tip of the iceberg as fewer people are testing.
What's happening in pockets of the globe, is that a canary in the coal mine?
Well, it very well could be. The UK definitely parallels us in so many different ways. We always pay very close attention to what our UK colleagues do.
With data from several countries, including the UK, showing sharp spikes in cases around the same time, here at home, restrictions have just been loosened.
Do you think there's a tolerance? Would Americans be willing to mask back up again?
The fact is that COVID may not be done with us. It's going to be around for a while. We'll have to deal with it. But you're right. There will not be an appetite for people to go back to a masking situation. So let's try and avoid that by doing other things.
Trying to prevent the next surge, the White House is seeking $22.5 billion in COVID funding. But many lawmakers have balked at the price tag for more boosters, testing, treatments, and variant research.
Well, it's absolutely critical. We will not be able to do the kind of research to address the inevitable next variant if we don't get the funding that we're talking about.
The $22.5 billion, that's a hefty price tag. Is all of that money needed?
I have to tell you, we need more than that.
Tonight, as Americans enjoy better days that are finally here, worrisome times could also lie ahead.
And Miguel joins me now. You mentioned that $22.5 billion the White House is asking for. What's the breakdown?
Well, Kate, about half of that money is going into coronavirus countermeasures. That includes vaccinations and booster shots. Remember, all Americans in this country get those shots for free, so they need a significant chunk of cash for that. About $1.5 billion, they say, is going into variant research. They're trying to prevent the next surge there. Kate?
All right, Miguel, thank you. For more on the latest COVID headlines, let's bring in NBC News medical contributor Dr. Vin Gupta. Doctor, good to have you. Today's St. Patrick's Day. I forgot my green, but people are celebrating. Most major cities in the U.S. relaxing mask mandates, COVID protocols. A couple weeks ago, the CDC director told me that in most parts of the country, she literally said we could put our masks in a drawer. Are we in trouble if this subvariant shows up here in huge numbers?
Kate, good evening. Thank you for having me. I suspect, and some of us have been saying this for some time now, that April 1st is going to represent a transition. April 1st, probably the next 6 months, where warmer weather coupled with the fact that 75% of eligible adults are vaccinated. Some others have had some exposure to the Omicron variant. There is some baked-in protection against ending up in the hospital seeing somebody like me. I suspect that's still going to hold true. There is no evidence for all your viewers out there that this new variant, BA.2, is in any way going to evade the protection from the vaccines when it comes to ending up in the hospital. So that's really critical here. Do I think cases may continue to rise? Of course. But cases are already happening all around us. We're not testing as much as we were previously. The key thing is here protecting hospitals. For the next 6 months, we'll largely have protected hospitals regardless of BA2 arriving.
Okay, people are really going to like that answer. I like that answer. Maybe for 6 months we have a little less trouble. President Biden was supposed to have an in-person meeting with the Irish Prime Minister today. They were together briefly last night. The Irish Prime Minister presumably had a negative test before he traveled to the U.S., but now he's COVID positive. The question is it time to rethink that? If people test negative and then come here and get sick, is that going to be a problem with this latest variant spreading overseas?
No, I don't think so, because ultimately, at the end of the day, we can only control what we can control. The vaccines do not prevent positive tests. That's not what vaccines against contagious respiratory viruses are intended to do. They avert severe illness. That's their only purpose. We're in a different reality now. So despite this happening, this is going to happen again for other travelers internationally. And we do not impose any type of restrictions here in the United States on travel. You can travel without a test, frankly. You can travel without being fully vaccinated. You just need to wear a mask. We need to simplify our guidance here. Get vaccinated, wear a mask if we need to protect hospitals come the wintertime, which I suspect will be the case in many zip codes across the country. But in no way should we be thinking about added measures when it comes to international travel, because we don't impose those for domestic travel.
Dr. Vin Gupta, great to have you with us. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Still ahead tonight, the search for a missing 18-year-old. Surveillance images showing her moments before police say she was abducted from a Walmart parking lot. The desperate pleas from her family tonight. Plus, the group stealing $100,000 worth of designer handbags in literally seconds. And it's not the only high-end store recently targeted by thieves. Also, ghost guns, the firearms built from a kit, and they've already been used in multiple mass shootings this year. Our Vaughn Hilliard gets a look at just how easy they are to buy. Stay with us. Back now with a tragic story in Nevada. Authorities searching for a missing 18-year-old woman. They believe she may have been abducted. Her family earlier pleading for her safe return. Maura Barrett has more.
This is the last known sighting of 18-year-old Naomi Irion, captured by security cameras. Authorities believe she may have been abducted in a Walmart parking lot in Fernley, Nevada, a small town 30 miles outside Reno.
We are out of time.
Her family joining police today to plead for the public's help.
We have to stay optimistic. There's no choice.
We really need your help. She's my daughter, but she's also your daughter, your sister. She needs help, and we need to find her.
Irion was last seen Saturday, making a purchase at a local gas station before parking her car outside the Walmart to wait for her shuttle bus to work. Images captured by surveillance cameras show the suspect approaching her car. Irion's brother, who watched the full video, described the suspect getting into the driver's seat and driving off.
This person did say or do something to Naomi to make her move over from the driver's side to the passenger side.
Investigators say her car was found on Tuesday, just up the road from the Walmart, less than a mile away. Authorities now looking for this truck, which they say the suspect may be driving. Forensic evidence leading them to believe the driver has a direct connection to her disappearance, which they call suspicious in nature. Her family in agony.
She's very friendly, maybe a little bit too trusting.
She loves people so much, and that's why she's so trusting. I'm so afraid that someone betrayed her trust.
Missing for 5 days, the search becoming more urgent by the hour.
Wow, and Maura Barrett joins us now from Los Angeles. So, Maura, you spoke with her brother Casey tonight. Did he give you any updates on how the search is going?
So he told me that he's joined investigators at the site where her cell phone last pinged a signal. And this, in addition to police announcing that they've deployed drones using infrared technologies to continue the search. He says that he's hopeful and encouraged by local support, in addition to the fact that the FBI and law enforcement from surrounding counties are getting involved now. But he emphasizes that the focus right now is on finding this truck. Kate?
All right, keep a lookout for that for those watching out there. Maura, thank you. Up next tonight, the break-in at a high-end retailer here in New York. Thieves stealing almost $100,000 worth of handbags from a Balenciaga store. It comes after a string of smash-and-grab robberies hit the West Coast last year. Zinkley Esamwawa has the details.
Tonight, a Hamptons handbag heist. Around $94,000 worth of luxury goods stolen from a New York Balenciaga store. Now police say they've arrested 4 people, with 1 suspect at large, and worry of copycat crimes.
This is part of an organized retail theft ring that is responsible for crimes.
On display at the press conference, a pile of recovered handbags, all stolen by a, quote, organized retail theft ring in just 24 seconds on March 3rd.
When she went into the store, she asked about a pair of shoes, and when the clerk went to get those shoes, the 4 co-conspirators rushed in.
Police say they were led on a high-speed chase, topping 100 miles per hour, eventually leading to a foot pursuit and arrests. Authorities announced Wednesday that the group was indicted and faces felony charges. Meth was also found in the getaway vehicle, leading to drug charges. In 2021, a wave of smash-and-grab robberies hit the West Coast, leaving shoppers on edge.
So it is kind of scary, and the fact that this has happened now makes me wonder if I should even walk in there.
Organized shoplifting crews smashing windows and fleeing in getaway cars.
I probably saw 50 to 80 people in like ski masks, crowbars, like a bunch of weapons.
Back on the East Coast, according to the National Retail Federation, New York is one of the leading cities affected by organized retail crimes. In January, a Louis Vuitton was hit on Long Island, a masked group alleged to have stolen 20 luxury handbags.
It's terrible, and I hope they catch the people and that they arrest them.
In D.C., athleisure store Lululemon was robbed twice. On Saturday, 4 suspects in hoodies and face masks walked out, arms full of apparel. Then, Sunday, 3 suspects, also in hoodies, entered and, according to police, stole $15,000 worth of merchandise. The case is open and under investigation as cities around the country work to end these store steals.
And Zinkley's with me now from here in 30 Rock. So Zinkley, these incidents are shocking. I can't believe they weren't even moving that fast when they went in and spent 20 seconds getting $100,000 worth of handbags. How is COVID interacting with all this? Or what is COVID related?
Yeah, Kate, that's an important question. And the National Retail Federation, or NRF, actually asked retailers this same question. How has COVID impacted the retail environment for your store? And in 2021, 69% of retailers tell the NRF that they saw an increase in organized retail crime. And when we look at that in terms of dollars and numbers, Kate, according to the NRF, companies say they lost an average of over $7,500 per robbery incident in 2020, and that's compared to around $800 in 2019. So dramatic spikes to watch, Kate.
Zinkley, thank you. When we come back, highway horror. Up to 70 cars involved in a fiery pileup in Missouri, what authorities believe might have caused it. Plus hundreds of bulletproof vests stolen from a nonprofit organization. Police say they were supposed to go to those on the front lines in Ukraine. Time for Top Stories news feed now, and the deadly pileup on a Missouri highway. Authorities say up to 70 cars were involved in the crash on Interstate 57 near the Kentucky border. At least 5 people killed. The entire highway was shut down. Officials believe fog may have been a factor. About 400 bulletproof vests meant for Ukraine were stolen from a nonprofit organization in New York City. Surveillance video capturing suspects walking out of the Ukrainian Congress Committee with boxes, loading them into a minivan. The organization says the vests were donated by law enforcement to help those in the war zone. If you or your friends use the same Netflix account, nobody would do that, right? Your streaming fees are going up, maybe. Netflix announcing it will begin charging fees to users who share their passwords. The company saying it will start testing ways to determine if users are sharing accounts outside of their home. Netflix will test the price change overseas first. And NASA just hours ago unveiling the world's most powerful rocket. After several setbacks, the 32-story tall spacecraft began its journey from an assembly plant to the launch pad at the Kennedy Space Center. It will undergo a final round of tests before the first uncrewed Artemis mission around the moon and back, which is scheduled for later this spring. Back now to our top story and a new way of understanding what's happening in Ukraine. Gabe Gutierrez is doing double duty for us tonight. He sat down with college students in Lviv for an inside look at the war through the eyes of young Ukrainians.
For the young people of Ukraine, the future looks uncertain. At a cafe in Lviv, I sat down with 3 college students and discussed the war, Putin, and the Ukrainian spirit.
I just looked through the news, and there was this big headline: Putin has started the war. That moment you feel like all your life has changed forever.
It was a shock.
Yeah.
You did not think that this would actually happen.
Well, that's the 21st century, you know. We live in a prosperous, democratic country. And when something like this happens, you cannot expect something like that from your neighbors. And I understand that there are tens of thousands of people who are dying. And these are common people, they are not even soldiers.
Has what's happened the last couple of weeks, has it made you more proud to be Ukrainian?
Yeah, of course. When it all started and I saw the dignity of our soldiers, even not soldiers, even common people who were just stopping the tanks with their bare hands. They were just facing it and they just tried to fight the way they could.
Why do you think Putin is doing this?
You know, he has this crazy idea that Ukraine is part of Russia. He thinks that we are like smaller. We are not a nation. We are not people. He wants us to be brainless. He thinks that we don't have our liberty.
Do you think that Putin will stop at Ukraine, or do you think he would try to attack NATO and other countries?
No, I don't think that he will stop in Ukraine.
You can see that by bombing that maternal hospital and children's hospitals, that they have no limits and they are not diplomatic. The whole world is trying to be diplomatic and speak on the language of diplomacy, but Russian government doesn't know that language. They only know the language of power.
Will Ukraine ever be the same?
Not Ukraine, not Ukrainian people from the beginning, and not even the whole world. We can't say, we can't forget. We won't forget, we won't forgive. Liberty and dignity is everything we want, and that we will fight till the end for it.
The reality of war through the eyes of the young, facing a future they never expected.
And Gabe Gutierrez is with me again from Lviv. So, Gabe, these students remember the Russian invasion of Crimea about 8 years ago, and I know you were saying that they feel like a cloud's been hanging over them.
Yeah, that's right, Kate. They wanted to stress that annexation of Crimea back in 2014. It is very fresh in their minds, and it has influenced their feelings about Russia. Over the last few years, they feel so strongly about their frustration and anger towards Vladimir Putin. And they wanted to stress the point that diplomacy just doesn't seem to work against Putin, only power. And so when talking about the international community, they are grateful for the support that Ukraine has received so far. But they want the United States, the European Union, and NATO to do more. Kate?
Really interesting conversation, Gabe. Thank you. FEMA aid is supposed to pour into communities here in the U.S. after natural disasters. But tonight we have an exclusive NBC Digital data analysis that reveals the most vulnerable communities are often left with nothing and unable to rebuild. And the number of those affected is expected to grow. Blaine Alexander takes us to a community that has been rejected for aid 3 times in just 2 years.
In Fultondale, Alabama, 14 months after the storm tore through, the scars are still fresh.
It was an EF3 tornado that touched down.
That was just hours after a tornado devastated this small town, impacting more than a third of the nearly 10,000 people here. And today,
just standing here right now, I'm counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 houses that are still damaged, still haven't been repaired from more than a year ago.
That's right.
Why?
It's all about funding.
Funding that was denied by FEMA, which determined the damage here was not of such severity and magnitude to require federal help. So the federal government would not declare Fultondale a disaster zone. And it's not just this town. An NBC News analysis found this tornado was one of 33 disasters denied FEMA aid over the last 3 years, when the federal government turned down nearly 40% of states' requests from FEMA's Individual Assistance Program, which provides money for people without insurance, covering everything from housing to medical bills. The reason? FEMA says certain disasters are too small for federal help, so state and local governments should step in instead. But Alabama is one of at least 39 states that does not allocate money to rebuild homes after natural disasters.
It is frustrating because it kind of leaves you helpless, to your citizens, to the ones that are still damaged and still trying to repair now.
But it's a challenge. NBC News found poverty rates are above the national average in nearly all of the areas denied assistance. Arnaldo Vasquez would have applied for FEMA aid.
This was your house.
He was at home with his family when the tornado tore through, trapped by a fallen tree for more than 6 hours.
Where were you?
The other side.
You were on the other side?
Yeah.
Paramedics had to amputate his leg on the spot to save his life. With no insurance, Arnaldo owes nearly $60,000 in medical bills.
No teníamos casa.
We didn't have a house. We didn't have clothes, he tells me. Everything had been lost. They have rebuilt thanks to help from Good Samaritans. FEMA says it's taking steps to identify and remove barriers to its programs, but for people in Fultondale,
there is no resiliency or coming back until you can get this stuff rebuilt.
There's no healing.
There's not.
For now, much of this town sits frozen in time and in tragedy. Blaine Alexander, NBC News, Fultondale, Alabama.
Back now with Top Stories Global Watch and a deadly earthquake in Japan. At least 4 people are dead after the 7.4 magnitude quake struck off the country's northern coast. The earthquake shaking homes, knocking out power, and even causing a train to derail. Major damage reported on the railway. Officials say no abnormalities, though, detected at the Fukushima nuclear plant, which you remember was heavily damaged in March 2011. Honduras will extradite its own former president to the U.S. Prosecutors in New York say Juan Orlando Hernandez protected drug shipments in exchange for political contributions. A judge in the country granting the request to send him back to the U.S. after Honduran authorities arrested him last month. Hernandez denies having any link to drug traffickers. And St. Patrick's Day celebrations returning to many cities after 2 years. An estimated 400,000 people gathered in Dublin, Ireland, as the city hosted its first St. Patrick's Day parade since 2019. In England, Kate Middleton and Prince William joined the Irish Guards for their annual celebration outside of London. And thousands of people, I could hear this out my office window, returning to Manhattan's Fifth Avenue as New York City's iconic St. Patrick's Day parade finally returned. Good stuff. Coming up, a look at the world of ghost guns, why these build-your-own weapon kits are easy to get and hard to trace. Our Vaughn Hilliard went to a gun show to find out. Stay with us. Back now with an in-depth look tonight behind the scenes of America's surging ghost gun market. The largely untraceable firearms are built from easy-to-use kits that can be purchased right online or with just a cash transfer at a gun show. No background check required. Ghost guns were used in 3 school shootings so far this year. And just this week, Florida police detailing how a 14-year-old boy ordered parts online, built one of these guns, and then a friend accidentally shot and killed him with it. NBC News correspondent Vaughn Hilliard takes us into one of those gun shows and shows us just how easily people are making these weapons.
This is a ghost gun. There's no record of it. It took no background check, and we have no idea how many like it are on our streets today. Because it's built from a perfectly legal, pre-packaged kit, and then made into a working firearm in the amount of time it takes to build an IKEA cabinet, just over an hour.
There was a black market ghost gun sale that went bad and turned deadly.
A 16-year-old student gunned down 2 classmates. Law enforcement tell NBC News the weapon may have been a ghost gun.
The firearm in evidence is described as an 80%er, a ghost gun.
Last year, the LAPD recovering more than double the number of ghost guns compared to the year before. In the weapons used in at least 24 homicides in the city. In Philadelphia, the police department recovered 571 constructed ghost guns, more than 5 times the number in 2019.
But just how easy is it to order the parts for these guns? This is our NBC producer, Jason, who lives here in Pennsylvania. There are a litany of options that come up of where you could purchase these kits. Boom.
But with the tools, you want to make sure you have everything.
It tells you the exact parts you literally need to buy.
This is where I suggest you get ammo from.
Done.
Thank you for your purchase.
Jason was able to place this order because he lives in one of the 40 states that has not regulated the selling of these kits. And that's also why we were able to walk into this gun show outside of Philadelphia. We went in with a hidden camera to show just how easy it is to buy a kit.
Or you can leave with it today.
And you don't need anything from me, right?
Money.
Money?
Yeah.
But no ID or anything? We're not doing background check?
No.
So then I'll just need essentially the drill.
Comes with the drill bits.
Comes with the drill bits and everything.
And then, like I said, you're just drilling 3 holes on each side. Cut these tabs off. There's tons and tons of videos online.
Okay.
Like if you just Google.
How long does it usually take you?
First time it's probably gonna be like an hour and a half, 2 hours.
Okay.
I mean, my fastest time was like 24 minutes.
24 minutes?
Yeah.
To buy other firearms at this show, they required background checks.
But to get this kit, it just took that cash. Have you seen the demand for your supply going up?
Yeah, the entire industry's gone up.
We tracked down Jordan Vinrow, the major ghost gun kit supplier in Pennsylvania, as we left the show.
So don't you bear some responsibility then when these guns get into the hands of criminals?
No, because I'm not a criminal.
But you're essentially handing them a piece that they can build in a half an hour and turn it into a gun.
Yeah, you can get keys and a pack of Budweiser and drunk drive kill somebody too.
Last year, the man who ran Pennsylvania's major gun shows agreed to no longer allow the sale of these kits. But when met with pushback by Vinrow and others, he sold the gun shows to Vinrow, who went right back to selling them.
You're following the laws right now.
Yeah, 100%.
Handing over those kits just for cash, that is by the books.
Yeah, it's like buying a lawn chair at Walmart. You can buy a lawn chair in cash.
Plus, these kits and the guns they turn into are harder to track because most don't have serial numbers. Because of these legal loopholes, many of them across the country, from shows and online sales, are bought by former convicts who are, by law, barred from owning these weapons. As just one example, there were 586 such convicts arrested with ghost guns in Los Angeles just last year.
This is the beginning of a ghost gun.
This reality has led many to call for a change in the law. Pennsylvania Attorney General Josh Shapiro has tried to classify these ghost gun kits as firearms. That would force people to pass a background check to get them.
Do you even begin to know how many are out on the streets?
I think it's almost impossible to know at this point. We need a national answer.
But there is no sign of legislation passing on Capitol Hill. The Biden administration is, however, working on formalizing new regulations to help curb the rise.
A ghost gun should be treated like a regular firearm.
2 weeks later, we returned to Pennsylvania and met up with special agents from the AG's office who agreed to use the kit we purchased from the show and build it into a ghost gun. But we also could have done it ourselves.
If you just go to YouTube, videos, how to, are still all over the internet.
We won't show you all the steps, but for the agents, it just took some drilling, sanding down, and a little bit of hammering. A firearm. Just over 1 hour later, ready to go.
Wow, Vaughn, you're here with me in the studio. I'm shocked by so many things you showed us there. The YouTube videos that you mentioned over and over again. One of the people said to you, "There's tons and tons." The guy in the gun show said, "Tons and tons of videos." Why is YouTube not doing something? They've said that they would try to pull some of those videos down.
They're still up. This has been a persisting problem. Now, we filmed some of this a couple weeks ago, and of the 3 videos that we actually used in this piece, one of them had been removed by YouTube, but 2 others were not removed until today when we flagged them to YouTube. Now, YouTube spokesman tells us, quote, "Our firearms policy prohibits content intended to instruct viewers on how to make firearms, including ghost guns." They say they are working on the technology to better detect and then take down these videos.
And there's been some talk, as I understand it, there's been some talk that the Biden administration might change some of the rules that the ATF follows regarding these guns. Is that happening?
This is the big development that we should expect to see here in the months ahead. And a lot of folks who are looking for better gun regulations around the ghost guns are eager for this to come to fruition here. The Trump administration didn't do it, but the Biden administration has proposed a rule which would essentially classify these kits as firearms before they're ever instructed. The rule says that a firearm would, quote, include a weapon parts kit that is designed to expel a projectile by the action of an explosive. Now, the big question is when this rule were to go into effect, how would it impact the ghost gun industry? We did reach out to the manufacturer of that kit that we bought, but have not heard back at this hour, Kate.
So everything you just said basically means it's considered more of a firearm then.
Correct, more of a firearm, which, again, just only 10 states have actually passed legislation to that effect here at this point.
Vaughn, fascinating. Thank you for providing that. Thank you for bringing us that story. Still ahead, our interview with actress and activist Angelina Jolie, how the Hollywood star is using her platform to shine a light on the refugee crisis in Ukraine, but also beyond, and on the millions of other displaced people around the globe. Finally tonight, as millions of refugees flee Ukraine, they join the millions of others displaced from war zones around the world. I sat down with Angelina Jolie, who's continuing her work to highlight other refugee emergencies impacting millions. With more than 3 million people from Ukraine pouring into neighboring countries, the crisis is inescapable.
I think we're all just watching in horror.
As a special envoy for the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, Angelina Jolie is deeply familiar with the impact of war. As a mother of 6, she relates.
And all you worry about when you wake up in the morning is making sure your kids are okay, right? And that you've done enough to make sure they're okay. And the look on the mother's face when she has crossed that border and she now has no idea suddenly what she is going to be able to give her child, how she's going to be able to protect her child. Ever a roof, ever food, ever a future. We can all relate to that.
Jolie has been on more than 60 field missions, meeting refugees from the Congo to Afghanistan and most recently Yemen.
I was just in Yemen 10 days ago, and there are emergencies that have been going on 8 years. Syria yesterday was 11 years. And these protracted, forgotten emergencies where people just have less and less support, and we have to find ways to prevent conflict, to return people, to help develop their communities and cultures.
Perhaps many Americans are connecting with the Ukrainian refugees because they see themselves in those faces. Jolie hopes we also remember the more than 80 million others displaced around the world.
Some people, for the first time, this conflict is making them track it and help them understand it. So it will open them up even more to understanding displacement and war and conflict. And what I would just ask is that we open up ourselves to care deeply when we see people in pain. Remember the women in Afghanistan, remember the people in Congo, but just to be conscious of each other as human beings and aware and to not forget is one of the most important things we can do.
Using that collective concern to drive change. Thank you so much for watching Top Story. For Tom Llamas, I'm Kate Snow in New York. Stay right here. More news now on the way.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.